The shovel bit into the hard earth with a sound that made Clara's blood freeze. Each scrape of metal against stone echoed through the moonless night like a death bell tolling. She pressed her face against the rotting barn slats, watching the silhouette of Jake Thornton dig methodically in the shadow of the old oak tree. He'd been at it for an hour now, his broad shoulders working in rhythm, sweat gleaming on his neck despite the October chill. The hole was already waist-deep, just the right size for a body. Clara's trembling fingers found the rope burns around her wrists where he'd tied her earlier. The memory crashed back, waking in the abandoned barn, Jake standing over her with those cold grey eyes, not saying a word about why he'd taken her from the boarding house. Not saying a word about anything. She'd known Jake Thornton her whole life, grown up 3 farms over, attended the same one-room schoolhouse, even shared a dance at the Harvest Social 2 years back. But that was before the accusations started. Before folks began whispering that Jake had been the one stealing cattle, robbing stages, maybe even worse. Before Sheriff Hawkins started asking too many questions about Jake's nighttime rides. Now here she was, watching him dig what could only be her grave. The wind picked up, rattling the barn door she'd somehow managed to pry open. Jake's head snapped up at the sound, his hand moving instinctively to the Colt at his hip. Clara held her breath, pressed deeper into the shadows. If he caught her trying to escape, but Jake just wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and kept digging. Deeper now, more urgent, like he was running out of time. Clara's mind raced through her options. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles through rough country. She could try to run, but Jake knew these hills better than anyone. She could scream, but who would hear her out here in the middle of nowhere? A metallic clang rang out as Jake's shovel struck something hard in the bottom of the hole. He froze, staring down into the darkness. Then he dropped to his knees and began clawing at the earth with his bare hands, pulling away clumps of dirt with desperate intensity. Whatever he'd found, it wasn't what Clara expected. Jake's hands emerged from the hole clutching something that caught the starlight, a metal strongbox, small but heavy, its brass corners dulled with age. Clara watched him wrestle it from the earth, his breathing labored, his movements frantic now like a man possessed. He'd been digging for treasure, not a grave. The revelation should have brought relief, but Clara's confusion only deepened. If Jake wasn't planning to kill her, why had he taken her? Why tie her up? Why bring her to this god-forsaken place in the dead of night? Jake sat back on his heels, staring at the box in his lap. Even from her hiding spot, Clara could see his hands shaking as he fumbled with the rusted lock. When it finally gave way with a sharp click, he lifted the lid slowly, almost reverently. The soft gasp that escaped him carried across the night air. Clara made her decision before she could think it through. Stepping out from behind the barn, she called softly, "Jake." He spun toward her voice, the Colt appearing in his hand faster than lightning. But when he saw her standing there in the moonlight, something broke in his expression. The gun wavered, then slowly lowered. Clara, her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse rolled into one. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should you by the looks of it." She took a careful step closer, her eyes never leaving his face. "What's in the box, Jake?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a hollow, broken sound that made her chest ache. "Everything," he said. "Everything I've been looking for, everything I've been accused of stealing." Now she was close enough to see into the strongbox. Her breath caught. Stacks of bills, gold coins, jewelry, enough wealth to make a man rich or destroy him completely. "This isn't yours," she said quietly. "No." Jake's voice was raw. "It belongs to the Clearwater Bank, stolen 3 months ago in a robbery that killed 2 men. He looked up at her, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. "Everyone thinks I did it, Clara. The whole town. Sheriff Hawkins has a wanted poster with my name on it." The pieces clicked into place. "But you didn't. My brother did." The words came out like he was confessing a mortal sin. "Thomas took it all and buried it here before he ran. Left me to take the blame." Jake's hands clenched around the box. "I brought you here because Because you're the only person left who might believe me, the only witness I trust. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Clara realized they weren't alone in the night anymore. Hoofbeats echoed from the main road, growing closer. The riders came hard and fast, their horses' hooves drumming against the packed earth like war drums. Clara counted at least 6 silhouettes cresting the hill, torches blazing in their hands, casting wild shadows that danced across the landscape like demons. Jake Thornton, Sheriff Hawkins' voice cut through the night air like a blade. "We know you're out there. Come out with your hands up." Jake was on his feet instantly, shoving the strongbox toward Clara. "Take this, get to town, show them what we found. I'm not leaving you." Clara pushed the box back at him, her voice fierce despite her fear. "We'll face this together. Like hell we will." Jake grabbed her shoulders, his grip urgent. "Listen to me, Clara. If they find me with that box, they'll say I was just moving my stolen goods. But if you have it, if you tell them what you saw, drop your weapons and step into the light." The sheriff's voice was closer now, maybe a quarter-mile out. "Last warning." Clara could see the torches spreading out, surrounding the property. They'd planned this raid carefully, probably followed Jake here. Her presence was the only thing they hadn't counted on. "There's something else," Jake said quickly, his words tumbling over each other. "In the bottom of the box, a letter from Thomas, his confession. He knew he was dying when he wrote it. Consumption got him 2 weeks ago in Denver. That's why I came here tonight. That's why I needed a witness." The hoofbeats were almost on top of them now. Clara could make out individual faces in the torchlight. Men she'd known her whole life, neighbors and friends who'd already condemned Jake in their hearts. "Jake Thornton," Sheriff Hawkins called again, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You're surrounded. There's nowhere to run." Jake looked at Clara one last time, memorizing her face in the flickering light. "Whatever happens next, remember what you saw here. Remember that I never raised a hand against you. Remember that sometimes the truth gets buried deeper than any grave." He stepped away from her, his hands raised, walking slowly toward the approaching torches. "I'm here, Sheriff. Don't shoot." But Clara saw the glint of metal in one of the rider's hands, saw the way the man's finger tightened on the trigger. These men hadn't come for an arrest. They'd come for an execution. "Wait." Clara's voice rang out across the night, clear and strong. She stepped into the circle of torchlight, the strongbox clutched against her chest like armor. "Sheriff Hawkins, you need to see this." The sheriff's horse reared as he pulled up short, confusion flickering across his weathered features. "Miss Clara, what in the devil are you doing out here, witnessing the truth?" She walked straight toward the sheriff, ignoring the guns trained on her from every direction. "Jake Thornton didn't rob that bank. His brother Thomas did, and he buried the evidence right here." A murmur ran through the posse like wildfire. Jake stood frozen between Clara and the sheriff, his hands still raised, disbelief written across his face. "That's convenient," sneered Pete Morrison, one of the bank's investors who'd lost money in the robbery. "Awful convenient that you'd show up just when Jake needs an alibi." Clara opened the strongbox, letting the contents catch the torchlight. Gold coins spilled through her fingers like water. "The money's all here, Mr. Morrison. Every stolen dollar, and there's more." She pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Thomas Thornton's confession, written in his own hand. Sheriff Hawkins dismounted slowly, his eyes never leaving the box. "Let me see that letter." Clara handed it over, watching the sheriff's expression change as he read by torchlight. His shoulders sagged as the weight of truth settled on them. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Thomas knew he was dying. Says here he couldn't let his brother hang for something he did."
Oh.
The sheriff looked up at Jake, something like regret flickering in his eyes. "Says he buried everything under the old oak on the Morrison property. That's here, isn't it? I've been searching for 3 months." Jake said quietly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Every night following the clues Thomas left. Tonight was the first time I found it." Pete Morrison snatched the letter from the sheriff's hands, his face growing darker with each word he read. This could be forged. How do we know Jake didn't write this himself? Because I was here, Clara said simply. I watched him dig. I saw his face when he opened that box. That's not the look of a man finding his own stolen goods. That's the look of a man finding salvation. She turned to address the entire posse, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. I've known Jake Thornton my whole life. He's a good man who's been carrying his brother's sins. The least we can do is let him carry the truth instead. Oh. The silence stretched like a held breath until Sheriff Hawkins finally spoke. Pete, you know as well as I do that handwriting's Thomas Thornton's. I've seen enough of his IOUs to recognize it. He folded the letter carefully and handed it back to Clara. And Miss Clara's word means something in this town, always has. Pete Morrison's face twisted with frustration, but he couldn't argue with the evidence. The other posse members were already lowering their weapons, the bloodlust draining out of them as understanding dawned. So what now? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now you help us get this money back to where it belongs, the sheriff said. And we try to make amends for 3 months of wrong accusations. Jake nodded slowly, then turned to Clara. Without warning he dropped to one knee in the dirt, his gray eyes reflecting the dying torchlight. Clara Meadows, I've got nothing to offer you but a cleared name and a promise to spend every day making up for the hell I put you through tonight. Jake, marry me. The words came out rough and desperate. I know I've got no right to ask, not after what I did, but you saved my life tonight, and I'd like to spend the rest of it proving I'm worthy of that gift. Oh. Clara looked down at him, this man she'd known as a boy, who'd grown into someone willing to dig up his brother's sins to clear his own name. You didn't put me through hell tonight, Jake Thornton. You showed me what courage looks like. She held out her hand, and when he took it, she pulled him to his feet. Yes, the posse erupted in cheers and congratulations, the mood transforming from a lynching to a celebration in the space of a heartbeat. Sheriff Hawkins clapped Jake on the shoulder, already making plans to clear his name officially. Years later, Clara would remember this night not for the fear or the accusations, but for the moment she realized that sometimes the deepest truths are buried in the darkest places. She would remember Jake's hands shaking as he pulled his brother's confession from the earth, and the way his voice broke when he asked her to marry him. Oh. But most of all she would remember the way the first light of dawn looked breaking over the horizon as they rode back to town together. Jake's name cleared, the stolen money restored, and their future stretching out before them like an open road. Oh. The hole under the old oak tree filled with rainwater that winter, and bloomed with wild flowers come spring, as if the earth itself was celebrating the truth finally set free.